Welcome back to another marvelous video. In the fascinating world of our favorite miniature wargame, Warhammer 40k, the Tyranids are considered one of the most terrifying alien species. These nightmarish creatures overwhelm their enemies with their sheer numbers, ability to adapt and evolve, and habit of consuming everything in their wake. But what exactly makes them unstoppable? Today, we'll dive deep into the gruesome depths of their twisted physiques, terrifying powers, and the role each bioform plays in the Hive Fleet. Let us find out what makes these monsters more than just a swarm. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Get us out of here, all speed! They must be warned! Someone must!
What are Tyranids in the Warhammer 40k universe? The Tyranids are in fact a vile race of insectoid aliens from beyond the galaxy, almost acting as a comprehensive and complex-like spacefaring ecosystem. It's not one single race, but a large assembly of bioforms, sharing a common genetic structure that works in unison to consume everything in their path. These beasts have an unstoppable hunger, believing all creatures ranging from lowly insects to high-tech civilizations nothing but mere food. The scale of the Tyranid threat is enormous, as their Hive Fleet drift through space, entire planets are stripped bare. Their organic matter is consumed to fuel the Tyranids' astonishingly rapid evolution and reproduction. In a very real sense, they are life itself, relentlessly pressed onward by an insatiable need to survive and adapt into the ultimate predators. Every Tyranid organism is physically bound to a communal hive mind, enabling perfect coordination across massive swarms that attack with terrifying efficiency. In a word, their philosophy of war is overwhelming numbers, pure and simple. The Tyranids reproduce at an alarming rate, drowning their victims beneath an endless torrent of chitinous bodies, as their bioengineered bodies rapidly grow by integrating features from species they gulp down. Their new forms become more dangerous with each new world consumed. At the heart of every Hive Fleet is the Norn Queen, an enormous, extremely intelligent creature that breeds the entire swarm. The Tyranids couldn't reproduce without her, which makes her the most vital bioform in their hierarchy, protected deep within the fleet's heavily fortified hive ships. A brief history of Tyranids. The Tyranids are not native to the Milky Way. Over thousands of years, they have traversed the vast expanse of intergalactic space in their endless search for new worlds to consume. Several consider that they have eaten their home galaxy, while others think that they have fled from a greater cosmic threat. Whatever the reason, the one constant of their arrival is an insatiable hunger, which promises to consume all life in this galaxy. The first contact with the Tyranids happened in 745.M41, when Hive Fleet Behemoth laid waste to the galaxy's eastern fringe, only to be barely defeated by the Ultramarines during the Battle of Macragge. This was but the beginning, as more and more Hive Fleets, like the Kraken and Leviathan, surfaced throughout the ages, adapting to new environments and overwhelming entire star systems. Even when defeated, the remnants of such fleets evolved and continued their attacks deeper into Imperial space. In the final days of the 41st millennium, Hive Fleet Leviathan threatened Baal, the home of the Blood Angels. Yet, warp storms and demonic invasions disrupted the Tyranid onslaught that saved Baal from utter destruction. By the Era Indomitus, which translates to the Age of the Imperium, the galaxy had been torn asunder by the catastrophic events of the Great Rift. The Tyranids now faced arguably their greatest challenge. The organic matter needed to sustain the Hive Fleets could no longer be gleaned so readily. Yet adaptable as they are, the Tyranids still found ways to survive despite all the troubles and continued their endless cycle of growth and consumption, fighting against the forces of the galaxy. What are some notable species of Tyranids? The Tyranid species exhibit an extraordinary variety, each with its unique role and characteristics. Here's a look at some of the most notable Tyranid species. Hive Tyrants. Hive Tyrants are formidable Tyranids who govern the swarm and act as a synaptic conduit for smaller creatures. They have powerful psychic talents and a stronger link to the hive mind than other sorts. Hive Tyrants function well in close combat or at range, sometimes with wings attached to enhanced mobility. They're the manifestation of a Hive Fleet's combined consciousness. They're very important, but their death does not weaken the presence of the hive mind. Norn Queens. Norn Queens are enormous biomechanical wombs through which all known Tyranid life forms are born. They mold biomass into new organisms tailored to the needs of the hive mind. A single Norn Queen is housed within a huge, hundreds of meters high chamber deep inside a hive ship. Carnifexes. Originally called screen killers, carnifexes are huge, bulky Tyranids designed to break with the mass into fortified positions. They're fitted with all manner of biomechanical armaments. Carnifexes may spontaneously mutate their body into subspecies better suited to perform specific roles, such as tank hunting and acid or toxin generation for anti-infantry. Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers are terrifying humanoids made of human genetic material. As the front line of Tyranid incursions, they infiltrate human communities and form Gene Stealer cults. Their sharp claws and close-quarters fighting abilities make them effective shock warriors on the battlefield. Zoanthropes. Zoanthropes are the big brainers, the psychic artillery who sport large-sized brains in comparison to their bodies. They undertake many other functions on the field through their psychic powers, and later Zoanthropes showed enhancements from assimilated Aldari DNA, particularly from the Hive Fleet Kraken's raid upon craft world Eandon. Biotitans. Biotitans are enormous Tyranid organisms developed to combat Titans and super heavy war machines utilized by other races. They're some of the largest land-based Tyranid creatures known to exist, ranging from 9 to 30 meters in height. So as you can guess, the amount of destructive power a Biotitan possesses is enormous, capable of annihilating whole squads of space marines. Dominatrixes. Dominatrixes are huge monsters that act as liaisons between the Norn Queens and the ground troops. Roughly the size of a Biotitan, they're physically powerful and symbiotically merged with a lesser entity that serves as a psychic link to the Norn Queen. Lictors. Silent and lethal. Lictors may change their appearance to fit into their surroundings perfectly. They're skilled at ambushes since they successfully surprise and eliminate foes due to their camouflage. The Lictors are frequently dispatched to scout and gather intelligence well ahead of the swarm. Hormagaunts. The Hormagaunt is a biological machine and living weapon created and bred to close quickly on a living adversary and eviscerate it with its long-bladed talons. It's a seemingly stable biomutation of the Gaunt genus. Hormagaunts are overwhelming shock forces, deployed in vast numbers by the billions on target planets. Spawned Hormagaunts can be left to rampage across battlefields and populations as simple hunter-slayer organisms, grinding down defense lines and forcing their prey to expend their lives and ammunition. Trigons. Trigons are strong, serpentine Tyranids that burrow behind opposing defenses. They can command a tunnel swarm of Lictors and Hormagaunts, and they tower over Carnifexes. Their armors produce bioelectric currents, which they can use as a weapon. Hive Guards. The Hive Guards are there to guard Tyranid structures and unleash blistering firepower. Their heavy armor makes them stable firing platforms for their massive impaler cannons. Hive Guards are physically attached to the shard beasts that form their ammunition, guiding their firing against enemies with unerring precision. Broodlords. The pinnacle of the Gene Stealer strain. Broodlords are frequently the first to set foot on a target world. They can easily breach the enemy defenses because they're strong and very proficient at it. As the leader of the Gene Stealer cults, they orchestrate their attack with an unexpected level of cunning and flexibility. In the unlikely case that a Broodlord falls, a pure strain Gene Stealer will eventually evolve to take over as the new leader of the pack. Tyrant Guard. Tyrant Guards are a unique species bred to guard Hive Tyrants. These towering, long-lived beasts are almost impervious to damage and are utterly dedicated to the protection of their synaptic masters. They have no eyes and act wholly under the control of the tyrant they serve. Sometimes, Carnifexes also come under the protection of Tyrant Guards. A few magi of the Adeptus Mechanicus have theorized that Tyrant Guards may share gene seed with defeated Space Marine chapters, but of course this is heresy. Tyranid Warriors. Tyranid Warriors are a breed of elite troops of the Swarm, falling between the size of Hive Tyrants and Gaunts. They're very much needed for leading the lesser Tyranids into battle because of their function as psychic resonators. Tyranid Warriors are flexible in combat and can fulfill both shooting and close combat duties. Raveners. Raveners are large, swift, serpentine creatures related to both Rippers and Tyranid Warriors. They're used for quick assaults, and they can burrow underground to strike enemy lines through surprise attacks. Gaunts. The most basic combat unit of a Tyranid swarm are the Tyranid Gaunts. Smaller and less physically formidable than other Tyranid types, they make up for it with extraordinary adaptability and attack in overwhelming numbers. Gaunts have very high mutatability, coming in variants with additional wings, venom sacs, and weaponized symbiotes in the form of spike rifles. Gargoyles. Gargoyles are flying versions of the Gaunts. They share many characteristics except that, in evolution, they have grown wings, and their lower legs are atrophied. Gargoyles retain most of the characteristics of the Gaunts, but have been fitted out with a selection of biomechanical armaments, which make them good aerial attackers. Mawlocks. Mawlocks are big, worm-like Tyranids that are thought to be closely related to Trigons. They are blind, but fantastically agile. Like a python, they swallow their prey whole, digesting it over several days. The Mawlock locates its prey through pressure waves and ground tremors, with which it's able to strike with surprising accuracy. Biovores. Biovores are slow-moving creatures used to cultivate and launch spore mines. The spore mines mature inside the Biovore's body before being launched out onto the battlefield, where they detonate on contact. Biovores are believed to be derived from Orcish gene stock. Rippers. Rippers are small snake-like species that consume biomass and recycle it into the hive ships. They're deployed during the last stages of a Tyranid invasion to clean up and digest the matter that has been consumed. How do Tyranids reproduce? The Tyranids have some sort of a biological reproduction method where, through the biomass consumed, new Tyranid organisms are produced. In this way, they can rapidly evolve and adapt to any harsh environmental obstacle. Let's take a look at this in detail, shall we? The Norn queen of a Tyranid hive fleet is the most crucial factor in all forms of Tyranid reproduction. They're constantly in need of fresh genetic material and nutrient-rich biomass, which includes a melange of organic and inorganic substances containing minerals, proteins, nucleic acids, and carbohydrates to create and modify Tyranid bioforms. This biomass is then collected with the reclamation pools on a planet's surface and lifted up to the orbiting hive ships through large capillary towers. After that, other Tyranid bioforms deliver this genetic material directly to the Norn queens. Inside the Norn queen, this raw material is processed through her genetic shredder organs. The queen's jaws collect the biomass and degrade its DNA structures down to a gene bank with a countless number of genotypes. This gene bank works much like a mammalian immune system, remembering each DNA sequence it has taken on board and using it for the creation of new Tyranid organisms. Once the Norn queen has designed a new bioform, it can be cloned by all the Norn queens in the same hive fleet. The reproduction methods differ according to what will be most effective. In general, Tyranid bioforms are born as tiny, twisted larvae or eggs, which do not gain their final forms for some time. Eggs are expelled from ovipositor orifices on the flanks of the Norn queen, while larvae squirm in nutrient-filled depressions upon her surface. Fetal sacs of other bioforms hang from umbilical cords, while teleporter worms spill out of the incubator pouches. Other, more straightforward bioforms may emerge fully grown and are put to work immediately by worker Tyranids charged with tending to the hive fleet. How do Tyranids communicate? Tyranid hive fleets, planetary swarms, and broods act with effortless coordination because the hive mind guides their every action. Instead of a unified command structure, Tyranids depend on a complex synaptic web of psychic influence and feedback. Within this web are several specialized synapse creatures with highly developed brains tailored as psychic routers, buses, and hubs. These synapse creatures coordinate and harmonize the enormous overall intelligence of the swarm, sometimes involving whole planets. Without these synapse creatures, the swarm may falter, and individual Tyranids can fall back into more bestial behavior should their instincts run counter to the directives of the hive mind. When this happens, swarms break into smaller groups that are more autonomous but retain internal cohesion. Although these synapse creatures tend to be mighty psychers, how they manage to avoid the attention of chaos daemons or other psychic predators from the warp is unknown and eludes the understanding of scholars within the Imperium. What is the shadow in the warp? The arrival of a Tyranid hive fleet is presaged by an all-pervasive psychic signal that permeates the warp. This is known as the shadow in the warp, where whole star systems are blanketed by this signal, interfering with all forms of warp travel and communication. This psychic static causes whole worlds to fall into a deathly silence, masking the terrors that are about to come out and the doom of those beneath. So, in one sentence, the shadow warp is a bad omen that warns of invasion and terror. Whether this signal is generated on purpose by the hive fleet or is simply an unintended side effect of the synaptic control of the hive mind is still not clear. In any case, the shadow in the warp provokes fear and panic among the defenders of a target world, sometimes plunging entire planets into despair. For highly psychic races, such as the Aldari, this sensation is much worse. If a psyker attempts to utilize his powers, the disarray becomes even more violent, as his mind is assailed by the cacophony of alien thoughts. Unless his mind is strong enough, he may descend into madness, babbling phrases in a tongue no man can understand. For the humans of the Imperium, particularly those dependent upon the psychic expertise provided by astropaths and navigators, the shadow in the warp represents one of the most insidious threats from the Tyranid forces, as afflicted worlds become isolated from the wider galaxy due to an inability to summon reinforcements or plot a course through space. By the time the shadow in the warp falls, it's often already too late for those planets. They will have to defend themselves with what little they can muster or face annihilation. What role do gene stealers play in the Tyranid strategy? In the Tyranid strategy, the task of gene stealers has been to infiltrate and contaminate other species by preparing their home ground for the eventual assault with a very complicated mode of infecting and manipulating. Of all the many subspecies that make up the Tyranid race, the gene stealers are perhaps the most feared and reviled. They often infest space hulks, merchant ships, and other isolated vessels to pave the way in advance of a hive fleet, scouting and sowing discord within the target civilizations. Waging guerrilla warfare, they can often blend in quite readily into civilian populations to insidiously spread their influence rather than openly fight. Gene stealers use telepathy to take control of critical individuals and form gene stealer cults, mixing aberrant hybrids with those under the control of a patriarch. The result is utter chaos as the population fractures into rebellious factions. Once the hive fleet draws near, it's the gene stealers themselves who rise from their underground lairs to exert control, slaughtering any who dare oppose them. The tumult and terror that the gene stealers sow thus provide other Tyranids Tyranid organisms, such as the lictors, with an opportunity to exploit this for further destabilization of the planet. Many worlds have fallen long before the Hive Fleets themselves arrive, all due to the tireless work of these pitiless infiltrators. None of the Tyranid threats compares to the Gene Stealer in turning the most steadfast worlds into a scene of internal strife and anarchy.
Their foulness will be but a memory. That is what the preachers.
What is the process of the Tyranid invasion? A planet that was previously home to sustainability and life gets transformed into a dead, arid rock that has lost all of its supporting life during the devastating, multi-phase Tyranid invasion. What sets each stage of this invasion apart are the unique biological threats and strategic objectives. Let's take a closer look at them. Stage 1. Reconnaissance. This early phase includes a secret assessment of the planet for invasion, characterized by vanguard drone ships and Tyranid forces like lictors and gene stealers. These creatures are designed for stealth and independent operation, which is highly uncharacteristic for most Tyranid organisms. The vanguard drone ships scout new star systems, utilizing their small size and meager psychic signature to deposit parts of their living cargo onto the planet's surface before quickly departing. Many times, this is a brief and furtive presence that largely goes unnoticed by planetary defenders. In such instances where these drone ships are detected, they often turn into priority targets with the hope of delaying or disrupting the impending invasion. Lictors are stealthy and mask their reconnaissance missions well as they study the atmosphere, resources, and native species of the planet. They will tap into the surroundings with their feeder tendrils, sending information back to the hive mind. Eliminating them before the main invasion can actually hurt the attack, as it will deprive them of much needed environmental data. Meanwhile, gene stealers infiltrate the fauna of the planet, corrupting its genetic code and creating hybrid creatures that could be controlled by a broodlord or some other Tyranid leader. Sometimes gene stealers can bypass the drone ships and arrive through other means, such as space hulks or cargo holds of Imperial vessels. Their destruction is paramount, lest a gene stealer cult be formed that may act as a focal point for the further endeavors of invasion. Stage 2. Infestation. Once the initial infiltration has succeeded, the invasion proceeds to the infestation stage. This is announced by the appearance of the Hive ship and escort fleet. The Hive ship is such a large synaptic node that its appearance causes a warp space distortional ripple, called the shadow in the warp as discussed earlier. It also makes it hard for the planet to call for help or defenders to coordinate effectively. Mycetic spores begin to be released by the Hive ship, which introduce alien microorganisms into the planet's ecosystem, changing its atmosphere, oceans, soil, and life forms. The spores give way to modifying the planet in preparation for the Tyranid attack, making its environment much more conducive for the swarm. By this time, the gene stealers and lictors that are already on the planet rise and start causing chaos, confusing and disrupting defenses. Depending on how much resistance was put up, it's said that the hive mind can sometimes change its strategy in the face of overwhelming opposition. Still, a timely intervention can cause much delay. Stage 3. Assault. In this stage, the Tyranid forces make landfall and begin a full-scale assault. Swarms of minor biolifeforms like gaunts and gargoyles pour across the planet's surface, while larger bioforms like carnifexes and tyrannofexes contribute to the devastation. These bioforms swarm in enormous numbers across wide battlefronts. Capillary towers burst from the planet's crust to synthesize absorbed biomass and breed further organisms. The towers absorb all available biomass, filtering plants and small organisms to further augment the Tyranid forces. If their initial attempts prove insufficient, the hive mind adapts by throwing either more numbers or the more specialized Tyranid organisms at the opposition. Raveners and Trigons burrow under defenses, while Shrikes and Harpies attack from the skies. The Tyranid swarm does not immediately devour the defenders, but the landscape behind them will be a desolate waste that later waves of bioforms will consume. With time, the skies start to grow dark from the gargoyles and harpies. The more polluted the atmosphere becomes, the worse the climate will grow for the planet, as the rays of the sun are blocked off from reaching the ground. Stage 4. Subjugation. By the subjugation stage, with most defenders of the planet cleared away, the remaining Tyranid bioforms start to round up all available biomass. This is then used to feed the hive ships in orbit and produce more Tyranid organisms. Rippers and other maggot-like Tyranids sweep over the planet, devouring every last shred of organic matter, eventually dragging their bodies to the reclamation pools near capillary towers. Such consumption is usually extended to the oceans of the planet and its subterranean materials, including mineral deposits. Stage 5. Absorption. The stage of absorption begins once all the defenders are defeated. After that, the capillary towers lift the planet's biomass to space to the hive ships, extending tendrils to the atmosphere, ingesting what's left. Then, the hive mind takes the genetic material picked up from the planet and begins to analyze it and develop new bioforms to use in future invasions. The end result is a bleak, airless rock, bereft of the biosphere that once teemed upon it. Those defenders who prove too late can do little but warn nearby systems to prepare against future Tyranid incursions. What are the powers and nature of the Tyranids' hive mind? The hive mind of the Tyranids is one enormous, cumulative consciousness guiding every facet of their invasion strategy. Overwhelming and multifaceted in scope, it displays a number of varied powers and abilities which give rise to the effectiveness of the Tyranids in combat and secure their dominance over whatever world they fall upon. Let's take a detailed look at these various abilities. Psychic Dominion. The Psychic might enable the Tyranid bioforms to multiply the power of the hive mind manyfold. The creatures channel and amplify the will of the hive mind, laying down an immense psychic influence over the swarm. By this, they coordinate all Tyranid organisms, enabling coordination on the battlefield with precision and a deadly strike. Catalyst. The hive mind also uses its synaptic conduits to energize its controlled organisms. The infusion of vitality energizes their metabolic processes so much that they can survive even severe injuries that would cripple other creatures. This unnatural resilience enables Tyranids to keep fighting despite grievous injuries and endure a relentless assault on their enemies. Inducing terror. One of the more psychologically grappling tactics that the hive mind engages in is protecting its terrifying presence via the synapse creatures. Flooding psychic emanations into the minds of their enemies instills fear and panic among them. This dread can weaken enemy morale and disrupt their combat effectiveness, further weighing the balance in favor of the Tyranids. Onslaught. The hive mind directing an assault also includes control over biomorph weapon symbiotes of the lesser Tyranid creatures. The synapse creatures seize control over such weapon systems, firing with lethal precision. At the same time, they surge the swarms onward with relentless velocity, piling on the pressure against enemy positions and building up an overwhelming tide of assault. Paroxysm. The hive mind paralyzes its opponents by overwhelming their nervous system with pain so intense as to render further hostility impossible. This entails the stimulation of all nerve endings and pain receptors in the body of the target, resulting in agonizing, crippling pain. Such a tactic not only hurts them physically, but also destroys the will of the enemies to fight back effectively. Psychic Scream. The hive mind can also unleash a withering psychic attack known as the Psychic Scream. Focused through one of its vassal organisms, the Psychic Shriek pierces the minds of those around it, laying them to waste. The sheer potency of the psychic energy can shatter or simply annihilate the mental functions of those it hits. Synapse. The Synapse ability is at the very heart of Tyranid coordination, binding all Tyranids into the collective consciousness of the hive mind. Synapse creatures, including hive tyrants, Tyranid warriors, bloodlords, and some specialist psyker organisms, such as zoanthropes, are needed to establish this link. Such creatures act as psychic conduits, interlinking in an area-wide network to enable the hive mind to direct and coordinate the swarm. Without these Synapse creatures, most Tyranid bioforms would degenerate into a feral state. However, some organisms, such as gene stealers, are capable of maintaining a semblance of cohesion due to their own gestalt, the so-called brood mind. Warp Blast. At last, the hive mind is able to release a catastrophic warp blast by channeling raw warp energy via its creatures. This attack, which emerges from the creature's head, has the potential to completely destroy everything in its path, demonstrating the devastating power that the hive mind is capable of. Are Tyranids a superorganism? More than being just a collection of various creatures, the Tyranids are a superorganism. This means that they are one living entity, guided by one all-powerful will, popularly known as the hive mind. They achieve this through a psychic linkage called the synapse that ties all Tyranid bioforms together. With this bond, the swarms think, perceive, and act in perfect coherence, create seamless coordination across the invasion force, an impossibility for any other army, given their immense numbers. Every Tyranid, from the tiniest of feeder organisms to the microbial life that breaks down biomass for reuse, has a purpose in the grand whole. The flora-like creatures rooting themselves on planets, and the great tendrils of the Hive Fleet, scouring entire star systems, form part of the grand design conducted by the hive mind. Large or small, regardless of function, every organism plays its part within the will of the hive mind to take part in the grand strategy and efficiency of the Tyranid invasion. While the Tyranid instinctive beasts, flora, and bacteria perform their roles without ever thinking, purely through instinct and biological predetermination, large and more complex forms of Tyranid bioforms can make decisions and find an appropriate response in any situation. These larger organisms remain part of the hive mind, with each individual representing a small fraction of its distributed sentience, yet capable of independent thought and decision in their minor and often inconsequential ways, still under the overall domination exerted by the superorganism. This structure of interconnectivity and shared awareness makes the Tyranid a superorganism, turning them into a terrifying force capable of adapting and overwhelming any kind of threat that crosses their path. How do Tyranids make their own weapons? Instead of relying on metals and plastics, Tyranids grow everything from organic biomatter reprocessed by intense gene splicing and through highly developed bioengineering processes. This is because every weapon, tool, and projectile utilized by Tyranid forces is in itself a bioengineered organism. The Tyranids fashion monstrous organic war engines from spores that poison the atmosphere to spires bursting from the ground during invasions. The Tyranid warrior beasts are terrifying creatures, armed with razor-sharp claws that tear enemies to pieces in an instant, while biocannons launch parasitic organisms into their prey. The most common weapons of the Tyranids are called biomorphs. In an awful organic way, they're grown from the biomass that is scavenged from the previously conquered world, and their entire technology is purely biological. Nothing about it would seem mechanical. Tyranid weapons function organically, as living extensions of their hosts. Biomorphs can meld into the body of their hosts, obscuring the line between where the Tyranid creature actually ends and its gun begins. Because of this bioconstruct nature, the Tyranids can take to the field with highly adaptive armies, each of their creatures uniquely specialized for a specific role in battle. Whether flying, burrowing, or charging right through enemy defenses, the Tyranids can grow entire new organisms and weaponry for any combat situation in record time, making them a truly dangerous and unpredictable foe. What are the bioartifacts of the Tyranids? Bioartifacts of the Tyranids are rare, symbiotic organisms and biomorphs unique to most of the Tyranid forces wielding them. Only one of each of these biomorphs exists in any single Tyranid swarm, because it's believed that there is only one of each in existence, or so it is hoped by the intelligent species of the galaxy. Maw claws of Thyrax. These were first used in the extermination of Thyrax, and they were equipped with pincers laced with symbiotic teeth. The creature spearheading this incursion ripped its adversaries to pieces with its talons, devouring their flesh and stealing their memories. Due to its gruesome mode of digesting, the creature could absorb more information about its victims, which increased its potency as a weapon. Miasma Cannon. The Miasma Cannon is arguably the most feared biomechanical weapon within the Tyranids' arsenal, whereas the other venom cannons are generally content to emit a stream of mostly standard toxin-laden slime. This variant does so at such potency that its victims are literally reduced to shapeless organic puddles in the blink of an eye. Whether vomiting forth noxious fluids or spitting gouts of acid, the Miasma Cannon is certainly responsible for countless deaths and untold devastation. Norn Crown. Named by Inquisitor Cryptman, the Norn Crown is a parasitic organism that clamps onto the head of its host. Its needle-like cerebrum bores deep into the host's brain and initiates a neurosynaptic link, making it almost a hyperconduit for the hive mind. This union strengthens the hive mind's control over the surrounding Tyranid hordes, making the host a powerful leader for its swarms. Reaper of Obliterax. The Reaper of Obliterax is a deadly biomechanical power weapon in the form of a bone sword that was first encountered against the Tyranid swarms of Hive Fleet Jormungandr. It often appears in conjunction with a lash whip, unleashing annihilating bursts of energy. Even a light playground blow from this sentient blade can be catastrophic, as it will rip its target limb from limb in an instant. Ymgarl. The Ymgarl gene stealers have long plagued Imperial worlds with their insatiable appetites and unrivaled adaptability. Now there are rumors of a Tyranid leader beast, no less adaptable, no less terrifying, that amplifies its lethality and makes it an even grimmer foe. How are the Tyranid bioships created? Tyranid bioships are grown, not built. These living spacecraft form the enormous Hive Fleets, which transport the Tyranid swarm across the galaxy. These vessels range in size from small escort vessels to enormous colony ships, and represent the largest species of Tyranid. They are each directly controlled by the hive mind. These bioships act not only as transports, but also as factories, manufacturing the varied Tyranid creatures that compose a planetary invasion. One of the mysterious things about these bioships is how they propagate. There are 3 probable theories, however, none of them are confirmed. Mitosis. This theory states that with a gain in enough mass, a ship would eventually divide into 2 or more vessels. It would not be too different from the process of a cell going through mitosis. In doing so, a bioship would be able to have offspring, and would even be capable of sharing the Tyranid organisms within it. Birth ships. The second possibility is that larger bioships birth smaller ships that continue to grow their own inhabitants, a more biological process of reproduction, so to speak. Infection. And last but not least, a very nasty hypothesis is that if enough Tyranids, or the right sort of Tyranid organisms, infect another vessel, it could become a fully capable hive ship, if enough time and biomass are available. This would allow the Tyranids to repurpose existing spacefaring vessels into new bioships. Unlike most spacefaring species in the galaxy, Tyranid bioships do not rely upon the warp as far as travel is concerned. Instead, they make use of a specialized ship called the Narval to achieve faster-than-light travel. While nearly defenseless, the Narval uses its monofilament spines to sense a wide range of gravimetric and electromagnetic signals that allow it to detect planetary systems at extreme distances. First, it seeks out a target system and uses the gravitational pull of the stars to create a compact space-time transit corridor through which the Hive Fleet can travel at superliminal velocities across vast interstellar distances. Since this form of space warping travel cannot be employed in close proximity to strong gravitational fields, such as those emanating from planets, once the fleet closes in on its target, it reverts to a slower, conventional biological propulsion. It's slower than the Imperium's warp drive technology, but a great deal more reliable. The Tyranid fleets can cross the galaxy with some degree of accuracy, and their arrival is often heralded by natural disasters caused by gravity manipulation from the Narval events that serve to weaken a world's defenses just as the Tyranid swarm descends upon it. Earthquakes, tidal waves, and solar flares often scour the planet, loosening it up for the Tyranids to overwhelm their foes once they arrive. Marvelous verdict. That brings us to the end of this video, folks. In the entire lore of Warhammer 40k, the Tyranids are among the most feared forces in the galaxy. They are superorganisms driven by the singular will of the hive mind. Being biological in nature allows them to adapt arms, ships, and organic forms very quickly to the biomass of the conquered worlds. Everything from the tiny feeder creatures to the immense bioships of their race plays into this one inexorable compulsion to consume. Their massive scale bioengineering, combined with the terrifying efficiency of their hive fleets, secures the Tyranids' place as a novel and terrifying foe that continues to evolve and overwhelm all who dare to stand in their path. Their self-transformation ability and the transformation of all that surrounds them allow them to pose an ever-growing threat to life on every side of the galaxy. I hope you liked this video. Which is your favorite Tyranid species? Let us know in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed watching this video and share it with everybody. I'll see you soon.